All I've got to say is, wow, we really appreciate this amazing turnout and you guys coming out to support the Madison Conservation District and the Southwest Montana Speaker Series. My name is Tom Jelko, and I'm the Conservation Programs Manager with the Madison Conservation District. Tonight we've got a great speaker and a fascinating topic planned for you guys. We've got Julie Cunningham. She's the wildlife biologist in the Bozeman area with Montana FWP. And she's going to tell us all about her amazing mountain goat studies, aka Oreamnology. And don't ask me how to spell that. I heard Julie speak about mountain goats on the Ologies podcast last fall as I was coming over the Wildlife Pass, and I was absolutely blown away. It was absolutely fascinating and one of the coolest discussions that I've ever heard. And I hope that you guys find this topic as fascinating as I did. And with that, we're recovering, everybody.
So much for coming out and taking time out of your evening to learn about mountains. I absolutely love that I get to share this with you guys. They're a very passionate of mine. I feel really fortunate to be able to study them. And I will do my best to give you guys the best talk I can and have a good evening. Let's have the next slide, please. There we go. Start talking with my people care, and I love because you guys showed up here tonight. I'm sure you do care about mountain goats. You think they're fascinating, you think they're beautiful, and I'm sure it's pretty dated to talk about a species that doesn't usually maul people or eat livestock or cause agricultural damage or if it is a disease risk. This critter is pretty remarkable. Well, a lot of people don't connect to mountain goats a lot because they're pretty rare. Dispersed across a big landscape, and they're at very difficult places to access. So people don't see them very often. They don't get to experience them. I have a little quote up there. Our chief pilot of Fish, Wildlife and Parks was a guide in Alaska for a while, and he's the one that flies me. So if you guys live in the Madison, I only fly over the helicopter a few times a year to count wildlife. He'll be my pilot most of the time. So Joe has this quote that he used to say in Alaska, and it was sheep go where men don't go, goats go where sheep don't go. And it was, I don't know, so we go. So next thing. So they're uniquely North American. You won't find them anywhere else in the world. They're iconic, they're rugged, they're unusual, they're beautiful, and they have a lot of value to hunters and to wildlife viewers and photographers. They have intrinsically a lot of full value in their niches of these high alpine ecosystems. And like we mentioned, they're relatively rare. How many of you guys have seen a mountain goat on the hook in person? All right, good. It's wonderful. So this isn't news to you guys. That's wonderful. I was doing a conference today in the Madison Valley a couple of weeks ago from my property over at the Cameron Way Station. And I was counting pronghorn, and some visitors were coming through the Madison. And they got out and said, "What are you looking at?" And I said, "Pronghorn." They said, "Is that some kind of a bird?" Next slide. All right, you guys. So you know they're divided up into nannies, fillies, and kids. Here's a picture of kind of a little family. You see the yearlings a little smaller in there. Next slide. Nannies have thinner horns with a curve at the tip. So this photo on the right, for the nannies on the right. Fillies have a big, wide base of the horn and a continuous curve. And an older filly, especially near rut, will have very dense glands. But I have the asterisk there because you can't always tell by the presence of the glands. And sometimes nannies do hang by themselves too. So just because it goes by itself doesn't mean that you can determine for sure that it's a nanny. Next slide, please. Kids are born early in the summer. Talking about glands is going to turn mountain marshmallows, and then up and up, and I just love that. And they are just as cute as that. They actually make a little noise. They make a really faint little beep. Sounds like a beep. It's just a little thing. Next one. As they grow, the Later, they become these fuzzy little yearlings. They start developing some horns. Next slide. So, slide because it shows you guys kids and kids how kids interact with their mom. And the one on the right is that kid's big brother or sister. It was a yearling. You can see by its small little face that it's a young goat. Yearlings will often stay with the nannies. They're very intermediate in size between the mountain marshmallows and the big adult goats. So you'll see these little family groups, and I have just this fantastic story of getting to watch some. I collared a nanny, and we had her, when we let her go, she runs back to her kid and the yearling, which were hanging together watching the whole process of the rocks above. And it was really sweet. The little kid made its little peep, and they ran to mom, and mom ran to it. The family reunited by the snowbank. Well, while mom was kind of recovering from being drugged, she's sitting there just drinking from the snowbank. The yearling kept trying to pick on the kid. It's not let's really do this dominance thing there. Deferred dominance is a big deal. And yearlings, if you guys have families with older brothers and younger brothers, or older sisters and younger, I'm sure you see the same kind of jockeying for position, seeing what they can get away with. The mom had to stop drinking, and she took the yearling with her horn to make it stop it, and he'd stop picking on the baby. Eventually, they all were able to wander off the cliff, and as I watched, I was able to see there were times that the little kid couldn't go where the bigger goats went, and the yearling was almost like showing off. I can come to this, I can't be. And then the mom would come back and either show the little one how to do it or help it up, or they'd go around and find a different way. So it's pretty sweet to see the little family groups and how they work together. So female goats reach adult body size around age 3, and that's when they're likely to have their first kid. Male goats will really reach their first body size more around age 4 or 5. Males are a little bigger. Next slide, please. You can tell how old a mountain goat is pretty accurately by its horns or its teeth. So they have annuli rings on their horns, like you can see in the graphic to the right. But there, it's during winter, the horn isn't growing at all. So a little depression is left. So what you're really counting there is the winters. In the left, when I see how harvested mountain goat fish wildlife parks, I'll pull down that lower lip and look at the lower teeth. And they lose their baby teeth. It's like humans with baby teeth. And the first ones get lost when they're 1-year-old, and 2-year-old, and 3-year-old, and 4. So if it still has baby teeth, I already know a little bit about how old that animal is. Next slide, please. Goats can live 16 years in Montana. This slide's just kind of a fun general facts about mountain goat slide. I've had nannies that are 16 and fillies that are 14. Their first reproduction is about 3.5 years old, so it takes them a little while to get to reproductive age, and they will not have to fit every year. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. It depends on their health, the vegetation conditions, everything else. Their diet is pretty variable. Browse, grass, lichen, forage, high elevation stuff. They're not specialists on any particular kind of vegetation. The winter often at the highest elevations, so they get to those windswept slopes, and they don't have distinct winter ranges. Like, I'll talk a lot about how hard these guys are to count. I'll come down into Madison, and it's like, oh, there's 2,000 of them, but the birds don't come down in group like that. They're up in those peaks. Mortality sources are sometimes hard to ascertain because those are so remote, they live so remote. And today I'm going to talk to you guys about the first modern GPS collar study we've done in goats in Montana. We have collared goats before, but with radio collars, and it's just hard to find out what their sources of mortality are until you're really able to do some intensive studies. But mountain lions and eagles are among the 2 most known in the literature. There's been anecdotes of even wolves getting at them, although a lot of times they go to escape train in cliffs that are high enough that it's harder for a wolf to access them. The other sources of mortality can include injuries that can take falls. There can be avalanches and other injuries even from hiding amongst themselves. Next slide. So what is a mountain goat? I'm going to tell you a little bit about the taxonomy, the biology, and how it relates to other species on the landscape and why that matters. So there's the family Goatae, the subfamily Capridae. Now from there, there's these different tribes. Through the Capridae, there are the rock goats, or goat antelopes. I've heard it called a couple different things. And then the tribe Capridae, where the true goats are domestic goats. And then bighorn sheep and domestic sheep are really closely related. So bighorn sheep and domestic sheep are like, first cousins, whereas mountain goats are like third or fourth cousins. They're removed. Nonetheless, they do share ancestry, so they can share pathogens, diseases, and we'll talk just a little bit about that later. Next slide. Other caprins or ruby caprins, the ones that are thought to be closely related to mountain goats, all of these are from Asia and Old World except for the muskox, which is pretty neat. Everything else is more Asian or European, and what is currently thought to be most related to the mountain goat is the chamois or the sirah, which would be a Chinese or a Japanese little ungulate thing. So it's a pretty neat variety of species with some. The Himalayan tarbar has the fluffiest coat I've ever seen. I just love that naming that they have. So pretty neat variation of animals that are like mountain goats. But our American mountain goat is unlike anything else really in the world. It's very unique. Next slide, please. So mountain goats did evolve in Central Asian mountain goats. They have relatives that way, but they're uniquely different. Archaeologists think they crossed the Bering Strait over 40,000 years ago. There's also evidence of a subspecies of mountain goat now extinct that used to live in the American Southwest, in New Mexico, Grand Canyon area. That was Oreamnology. Next slide, please. So moving kind of to the modern management era, mountain goats were largely native west to the Continental Divide. But there are places where fossilized evidence, the fossil record is really little because they're living in high rocky environments where fossils are harder to find than, down in the sediments where they get stuck in the mud, for example. So we don't have a lot of fossil records, but our knowledge is that goats were native west of the Continental Divide. In Montana and in other western states, we moved them east of the Continental Divide to good habitat for hunting opportunity. So you can see on our map that our Madison mountain goat ranges are all introduced populations. So I'll tell you about where they came from and some more. How we transplanted mountain goats is worth a book in itself. Really entrenched processors. Bob Cooney, Bay Cooney, there's some others. With trap goats at Deep Creek and then the Pendlers and then some other areas in the Rocky Mountain Run. They trap them over salt lake. And then kind of get they put them in panniers on mules, but they'd have to tie the horn stack so the goat would stick the mule in the butt. Again, they put like post pipes on the goat's horns so they wouldn't pop the raft. But then trapping, goats come in just all the spring when the runoff is huge. That's the south fork of the flathead coming out of the bog. Then they take out the seats in the aircraft and then put safety straps over their horns, even though they might be sedated at the time. Sometimes they would be sedated, sometimes they'd just be physically restrained. So yeah, whether mules or planes or rafts or trucks, it's a lot to get mountains where they're going. So a lot of our mountain populations came from only a handful of individuals because they're hard to trap. Not just personal trapping, and I can verify they're really hard to trap. Next slide, please. So this slide, I hope you guys can see a little light. This is a publication done by Montana State University where they really went across the whole country of Yellowstone and learned mountain goats are phenomenal pioneers. The green dots are the location bins where we took goats from their native range and we released them. So there's green dots, the release site. Like Bear Canyon one, Wolf Creek's one in the Madison, and let's see, West Fork of the Gallatin over on the Big Sky side of the Madison. There's another release site. They spread into the Henry's Mountains all on their own. We never put goats in the Henry's. They colonized that. So that's pretty cool. The Gallatin Range, we never technically put goats in the Gallatin Range. They colonized that. We did put goats, they absorbed the Beartooths and the Crazies and the Breakers. So some pretty great works from my predecessors. Next page, please. So this graphic shows how native populations have declined. One of the biggest mysteries in mountain goat conservation is why did native populations struggle? And our introduced ones have done phenomenally well. I talked to my counterparts in Colorado, where goats were not native, and the goats are doing great. Some places in Utah, they're doing great. But in some places where they're native, they really struggle, and Montana's no exception. Our Montana Northwest, where goats were native, you can see their numbers have just really dwindled. So, a lot of was introduced population numbers have gone up, but this is not numbers of goats, this is numbers of licenses. So these are the hunting licenses that we issue. So we started in the 1960s, it was actually unlimited licenses. And region 1 and 2, they didn't think people would go up after those goats. They're like, why would somebody go all the way up there and shoot a goat? But people were. And then eventually by the 1970s, we started limiting the number of licenses. But still, if there were an opportunity, we would issue more licenses. And you can see in region 3, we have good goat counts and high license numbers compared to everywhere else in the state. You guys in the Madison range are pretty fortunate. I should have had the statistic at my fingertips. But we have so many goats in the Gallatin, the Crazies, the Madison, the Bridgers. It makes up about 85% of the mountain goat hunting opportunity in the state. It is here in our southwest Montana area. Next slide, please. So, like I said, why are goats doing so well and other goats aren't? I've got some questions about disease. Like I mentioned earlier, there's still relatives of domestic sheep, wild sheep, domestic goats. They are susceptible to a pathogen, an ugly one called Mycoplasma pneumoniae. It causes pneumonia. And in domestic animals, it's not a huge problem. It can cause weight loss. It can cause loss of babies. But in wild goats, it could kill them. In wild sheep, it could kill them. Predation is another question. In some areas where goats have been declining in native areas, there's been a lot of mountain lions. What about eagle increases? Then there's climate and habitat change questions. There's been lack of logging, for example, and fire suppression, and we don't know how conifer encroachment on the range could be interfering with it. There's small population risks, so if you don't have very many goats and just by odds, the females throw a lot of males when they have their babies, and that's not good for the population thing. You know, that can happen in a small population. It's called demographic stochasticity. There's questions of disturbance, recreation, moving them around. They have time to eat. They have time to do the things goat needs to do without being chased around by people. In some areas, in region 1 and 2, western Montana, they've wondered if the effects of past hunter harvest were just so deep that put goats in a hole they couldn't get them out of. There's actually folks in region 1 and 2 who want to take goats back. Like, what's the populating our mountain ranges, and they're asking, hey, can we have them back to repopulate our areas? And realistically, it's probably cumulative effects. You guys who know a lot about kind of natural world realize things are really as simple as just one thing. There's very little single factor ecology. So it could be a little bit of all of these things, and it could be different influences in different places. Next slide, please. So meanwhile, the produced herds, they're putting their habitat and they're running it. It was great. This is a picture I took with my pilot, Steve Hart, during the Madison range. The goats all in a line, rocking and we're directly above them. So they can experience virtually exponential growth as they settle. And they are colonizing other areas. So they're looking really good. Next slide. So with some parts of Montana not doing well, and other parts of Montana doing relatively well, FWP created a mountain management strategy. Lots of questions about the pathogens, the predators, the habitat. Next slide, please. One thing I'm happy to say, because I guess I'm an Oreamnologist, is FWP in Montana values the native and non-native or introduced mountain goats. The introduced mountain goats came from Montana. They're native Montana genetics. They just weren't native in this part of our state. But I'm glad that we value them. In some places in the American West, goats that were introduced they've been removed because they're concerned either about alpine vegetation or interactions with bighorn sheep. So I definitely appreciate wanting to be attuned to alpine vegetation and interactions with bighorn. But I think that these guys are also a species in need of management. If they're struggling so poorly in areas where they're native, we're lucky to have areas where they are doing well, because I think there's a lot of reasons we as a community would want the species to continue to exist on the landscape. So it's good to have places that are doing well. And like I mentioned, if you're a sportsman or a sportswoman, having places where you can hunt them means a lot. So introduced herds can become sources to restore native herds. Even if you're not a sports person who puts in for these licenses, I mean, if you just enjoy seeing them, it's good to have them on this landscape. And I talk about hunting. I'm going to continue to talk about hunting through this, and I should have put it earlier in the presentation, but my little note on the bottom is my job, and everything you're seeing today is paid for by hunter license dollars, and the Pittman-Robertson Act, which is the Federal Land and Wildlife Restoration Act, that's an excise tax on firearms and ammunition. So all of that funds, all these counts, all this research you're going to hear about, all these collars. So a lot of what we know about mountain goats has come from hunters. So thank you if you are a hunter. Next slide. Count data are so important for our management. So important. Goats can be really susceptible to overharvest. So like I mentioned, you know, a lot of funding comes from hunting, but on the other side, part of hunting is conservation, right? We want to have generations in the future be able to enjoy this animal. Goats, because they're relatively short-lived, and up to age 20, goats that are shorter-lived, they don't have as many young, they start reproducing later. Harvest can be additive, which means that too much harvest can drive the population down. So we got to be careful. We got to know what's out there and issue our licenses appropriately, conservatively to protect the herd. We issue licenses for 3 to 7% of the count, or estimate for an introduced herd. Native herds, the biologists in native herd areas often do licenses to 1 to 2%, just to be on the safe side if the population is struggling. So when I go out and I fly, I do kid counts to see if reproduction is healthy. Seeing a lot of kids on the landscape is a good sign. I do family counts because hunters often target the males, and want to make sure there's plenty of males available to harvest. Next slide. But getting the counts is harder than you think. Sometimes you fly over like I did here, and this was the Madison Range District 362, where all 70 some groups were like right there in front of me. Well, this top one was up at Cedar Lake, so Cedar Mountain, and they're just pretty obvious there. These were a little harder, and I don't know if you can see it. They were around the natural archway in the Taylor Fork, and they were moving in and out around this rock. So I had to kind of chase them to see them, but it was a beautiful day. One of the next questions is, when's the best time to do a survey? I often do summer because it doesn't interfere with hunting, but honestly, fall hunting season, because it's cool and nice and right at the rut, you can really get good counts then. But some pilots don't like to fly in the fall because we wouldn't want to disrupt somebody who's out there trying to have a hunting experience. Next one. So, I want you to look at this and see how many goats you see. You can see that little helicopter shadow at the bottom. This is the Sphinx, right outside your doors. And then 23 goats in this picture. And so next slide, please. Here's slits. You guys see the red circles? There's a big red circle. See if I can move the red circle here. Smaller circles, round circles. Next slide, please. There they are. There they are. I love that series because it really gives you a feel for what I'm seeing when I'm out there. And they're moving all around. So I'm like, come over here, come over here. And so having a good camera sometimes really helps you zoom in. Next slide, please. Ground counting can help in some areas. There's a couple people here. They see your hands. If you've done the Hendrix Mountains, at least one. Some other people are proud of them. I worked with the Rocky Mountain Alliance. The Rocky Alliance is kind of like the Wild Sheep Foundation or Rocky Mountain Road Foundation for mountains. And we go out around. This is an example of the Bridger Mountain Range. We send people out and do ground counts. Next slide, please. And it's a phenomenal method to count. So one of the questions is, how many goats are out there that have not been observed? And how many are? How good are citizen ground counts? I'll tell you, our new this has indicated that we'll count about 70 to 80% of the estimated goats out there. But I'll tell you, I love this one. And this, I think, the survey you were on, it's a 2018, we did a ground out with citizen scientists, and we counted 58 goats with 14 kids. Just like 2 weeks later, Idaho fishing game from the whole mountain range, including the Montana side, so the Henry's is Park, Idaho, Montana, they counted 57 goats and 14 kids. I love the agreement in the total number, and I love the agreement in the classification. And I've just seen it over a lot of work in the breeders with ground counts. Oh, getting citizens out there is phenomenal to help increase our quality of counts and our information about the species. Next slide, please. So this is an example of found last year. The Goat Alliance got together. One of the things I love about getting citizens involved in their goats, this goes back to what I said in one of my first slides, which is you guys are a pretty exceptional audience in that you guys have all had an experience with the mountain goat. Almost all of you have. But what's really great is when you get people, kids, the fellow there had a license that year. So he got to take trainings and learn about the animal. Everybody else wants to be out there someday, for example, or maybe they just love goats. And so they get the training, they get the experience, they go out and have a nice outdoor adventure, get to connect with these animals, get to practice his abilities and the nannies and the kid. But it was really to involve the public in the management of their wildlife. Who's wildlife? The public know the wildlife. They're your wildlife. And getting to share these experiences and share these animals and having citizens contribute to the science-based management of their species is just really rewarding. Next slide. So let's talk about the Madison. There are 5 mountain districts in your guys' mountain range that I work with. The Spanish Peaks through 24, the North Madison and the Cedar Lake area with the Sphinx and the Helmets through 25. 326 is the Taylor Elgar Basin. It was recently combined from 3 separate districts. District 362 in the Cabin Creek area, and District 361, which again is a pretty unique one because that was only a hunting district in about 2014. And thanks to the Goat Alliance and citizen volunteers and ground counts, we were able to establish it as a hunting district. Goats naturally colonized that area on their own. They just moved into it. So all of your guys' mountain goats came from either the Rocky Mountain Front, the Swan Range, or the Pioneer Range in the 1940s to 50s. So some of those pictures could have been the ancestors, the goats you see out here with us when you, whether it was an airplane or a horse or a raft. That's how they got here. Next slide, please. So how are the goats doing in New Madison Range? They're doing really well, generally increasing. More than 500 goats now. We get 23 licenses. So to reference how important the opportunity is for our sportsmen and women, more than 1,800 hunters again will apply for the opportunity to hunt a goat in the Madison Range in one of those 5 districts. So one of the things you'll see is all these areas are going up except for the District 326. I've got questions about that. Since about 2005. I don't have this assertion, but one of the questions in my mind is whether the goats had any pneumonia pathogen challenges because these 326 goats overlap with the big herd sheep and the Taylor Hildars who've had some pneumonia challenges over the years. So I have a little question in my mind there. But on the right side of the areas surrounding them, you're generally seeing increasing trends. Well, and it's a little biased to say it because we know that the population started at 0. So it could really only go up from there. On the right side, I mean, seeing increasing trends, whether it's from 1965, 85, some of my districts, they have only modern stuff like District 361 because they just found their way there. It's good to see those increasing trends, and I'll be keeping an eye on 326 to see what's changing there. I like that increasing trend since about 2005. Hopefully we'll keep that up. Next slide, please. So I'm kind of excited to tell you guys, this hasn't really come out public yet, but we may be able to bring mountain goat research to the Madison Range. Madison Range has been identified as a study area for disease surveillance and as a control area to learn about habitat use, home ranges, and population ecology. And as I mentioned, it's a potential source to reestablish goats in their native ranges, but that's down the road. Next slide, please. I would like to tell you about what a mountain study looks like. And this is what could be coming to your back door. I've been working in the Bridger Mountains quite extensively for about the last 3 years. Bridgers are north of Bozeman there. The Bridgers were chosen as a study area as part of the statewide bird health assessment to see if mycoplasma pneumonia, that bad that had pneumonia pathogen was there. Fortunately, it wasn't. I'll jump to that punchline. The pictures also have very intense recreation use. Next slide, please. The goats were introduced to the breeders in 1969. 13 goats from the gates of the mountains, which is interesting because there's not very many goats left there. These goats appear to be thriving, despite coming from a small population size to start and enormous recreation pressures. There's about 120 goats in the breeders. We get trophy villains. Why that matters, even if you're not a hunter, is getting a trophy class animal means that animal's got good genetics, it's got good forage, it's able to put on the kind of fat it needs to grow that beautiful horn. So that means they're doing well. But as you can see, the goats are right next to our goat counter here, and habituation issues are a concern. Next slide. The bridgers are full of camping and drones and paragliding and hiking and film crews and dog walkers and trailers and hunters and skiers and snowboarders and bikers and you name it. I actually saw a guy up in the bridger backpacking with South Cat. I mean, big places. So if you can see on this slide, there's about 120 miles of designated trails that cross about 40 square miles of habitat. Those blue blobs are color data that show you where the goats are. Sometimes go nocturnal. If you guys are familiar with bears, sometimes they live at night to avoid people. Well, to some degree, I think goats do the same. I took that out of my tent window with my headlamp and cell phone, and after midnight, she was eating charcoal. I could just hear her, not just so because those nocturnal risks, though, I have to really try to outreach the public in the Bozeman area as much as I can, because sometimes people leave their dogs out of their tent at night, and if a dog gets too close to a kid, the nanny could bore it. We have had dogs get moved as nannies have been their young. So if you're ever up backpacking in the bridge, keep your dog in the tent. Next slide. So I wanted to show you guys some pictures of what the goat counters look like today. It's pretty exciting to be a part of this. This was some of my best days on the job. Our campaign had a lot of different ways to be captured. The most efficient was helicopter netting. So on the right is the picture of the helicopter with goats in a sling. If you ever get a chance to look at this picture close up, you can zoom right in and see their little faces poking out. They got little blindfolds on. We put the pipe on the hood so we don't get bored. None of us got bored. These guys got bored and sent to the hospital. You got to watch out for the thorns. We took swabs and we did roll disease workups. Next slide, please. So I put circles on this so you guys can see it. This is what a capture looks like. So the helicopter has to go right up to the rocks. You can see that goat in the bottom, about a red circle. When you drop wash and everything else in the wind, you don't want that goat to let the net go. But that goat's hitting a cliff. And if your propellers at that cliff, you're gone. So this capture crew, I'm sitting on a bench out in the open, and they're doing this. I'm the one taking these pictures, so I watch the whole thing. And then once I get the goat, it greets me, so I get to do the cool thing and get the video color on it. But they're incredible human beings. So that pilot is the best in the world. Okay, next slide. So here you can see it coming in closer. It's zoom it in. Next slide, please. Now the goat and the helicopter are in the same circle. The goat was right below it. This is right before they threw that net out on the goat. And we had to chase it out of that rock crevice just enough to get a safe shot. So that pilot, there's a guy tethered to it, hanging out with his net gun. And the helicopter pilot has to be watching the rocks and watching that goat and watching his net gunner. Next slide. So then the goat's in net. It's not sedated. There's no drugs on this animal. And just slides down the mountain. The helicopter tows in. And if you ever tow in on the slope, it's really tricky. You have to cover because if it's towing in and the slope's going uphill, the rotors are pointing right uphill. So you got to watch your propellers, and you can't go backwards either. So you'll get hit by the tail rotor. So these guys have to be so careful of not letting the adrenaline hit their head. So the helicopter drops off this guy. He jumps out. So it's going to be crashing and fighting with no safety, anything on it. And this guy was going to wrestle it down and haul it. Next slide. So that's not off. And they're going down. The goat's just sliding down the slope. Next slide. So then they are on top of the collar. Next slide. And then they hook up to the helicopter. Once the goat's popular, they do a long run and attach the goat, and then they bring it to me at the processing area. So it's incredible to watch. These guys got 12 goats in one day. 11 goats in one day. They were incredible. Next slide, please. We spent into their butts. You can probably see their goat's collar. She's so fun. Can't see the collar under all that hair. So we took one straight. So when the helicopter was looking for goats, we see them, but that was from the capture, leave it alone. So that's why they all have 100 bucks. Next slide, please. In the summertime, we tried to do what Glacier National Park does and put out salt bait and catch goats in clover traps. So this is a clover trap. It's a net around a steel box, and then it goes into the salt. You can have a remote trigger, but we chose not to do that because of the number of people that recreate the bridges, and also we didn't want to drop the net on a kid and risk separating from a nanny. We didn't want to, drop the bar on an animal's back or drop the bar on 2 animals in a trap. That could be a disaster. So what we did was we padded the goats using trail cams and then hid in the bushes with a long string to pull the trap, which is actually a rat trap. It triggers it and then it drops. So because the goats were not pregnant, or remember the pictures of the goats in the campsite, sometimes I'd be hiding in the woods at like 2 in the morning. Looking goggles from the game artist, and that was really fun. But sometimes, because the number of people in the bridge, some people partying up there, and sometimes people be like walking out and they'd be walking. I didn't know I was there, and I should I say something, or that just made me surprised to shoot me or something. So I'm so so that was kind of the type of adventure doing about terminal trapping. Next slide, please. So, as I can tell, when we go out with our helicopter and capture elk, it goes amazing to capture guys kill 30, 40 elk in a day. It also like capturing grizzly bears. They're really hard to capture. We ended up with only 15 goats captured. We tried for 30. We could have done more ground dive. I'll show you the demonstration that was present. The reason we did the ground dive is darts have an induction time of 2 to 5 minutes. I'm going to go to places in 2 to 5 minutes. Goats are also harder than the animal. Goats can be, they can be fine, but there's extra risks of them overheating. There's risks of if you lost the dart on the place where so many humans go. So we just had to be careful. But yes, we ended up with 15 goats captured, 14 collared. One was a juvenile male, too small to get a collar. Next slide. And this is some stating that kind of innovative biologist is. The technology is so great. Like just in the time since I went to school in the 90s to now, what's happened with collars is phenomenal. Like I can get on my cell phone and see where these goats have been. So cool to get this. I mean, it used to be VHF collars where you had to go look for them and find them. And then it became strong bird GPS collars where they drop off and you go get it like an Easter egg and they'll go home and download all the data. Now it just goes to a satellite and it does all the stuff. It's not real time. Like I can see where the bird is this minute, and I can see where it was the last time it uploaded, like a couple hours ago. Amazing, amazing technology. And I wanted to show you guys that because you can kind of see the different home ranges, maybe where they're going to be grouping up. But that's a little bit second with the data that we have. Next slide. So the measures being, I'm happy to report fewer pathogens. They didn't have that bad in Moby. And since 2020, we've only had one mortality, and it was a nanny. She was 6 years old. She had a big injury in her side, an abscess. I couldn't tell if it was from a stab from a gun goat or if she was injured in a fall. But I'm pretty impressed with the low rate of mortalities. And recreation work, we got trail cutters out. We'll learn about recreation. Next slide, please. I saw the meeting closing. This is up to my last slide. This is what it looks like when you run. So we're on top of it. If you put the mouse on it, there should be a play button there. So one person's holding the head. You got to make sure you get the blindfold off. The worst nightmare of a biologist is to release a goat that has blindfold on. They would never die. So he just was holding that on. It's very fun to see him run off like that. And it's amazing how quickly they're around the next drainage. That was an incredible thing. Oh, yep. Well, the next slide should be my, there it is. And then I don't know, my husband always accuses me of talking about goats ad nauseum. It's one of my favorite things. So there's time for practice of having to take them. Yeah. How does the eagle kill a goat? That's a great question. And maybe they kill kids. Cliffs. They'll swoop down. I had actually watched a little eagle in this Madison Valley kill a pronghorn. And it was small though, like maybe a year ago. But it crushed its spine with its talons. And at one point I saw it and I like ran out because I thought it was a dead one. I had an necropsy for part of my job. And the pronghorn stood up bleeding from its side from talon holes and ended up succumbing to that eagle attack. But yeah, so eagles have gone off of this. So nannies will take the kids and have the kids like hide under their tummies. Which is pretty cool. One of the things that nannies do to protect their kids is, if you notice, a lot of times if they're under treasure strain, it'll be above the nanny, and the nanny will keep it from falling with her body. So yeah, they use the towels to try to fight off the eagles sometimes, but eagles are a major predator of the little ones. And yeah, they're amazing. So they're really circular and they're kind of squishy. It's kind of neat where that not custom or has to be surrounded with. You gotta feel these hooks. And I don't know if it's like proximity on the rocks, like having hiking boots. But yeah, their pads are kind of phenomenal. So well adapting for the kind of life that they live. Yeah.
They get so clean when they're running in the snow or something.
Yes, that's pretty clean. It's really funny too, though. At this time of year, oh yeah, I told you this. So a lot of times I can tell the nannies from the village this time of year because the nannies are just draggled with the hair sticking off of them everywhere and they're dirty. And I think it's because, you know, new moms don't have time to take care of their hair. Where I was like, it's super sweet. They're like taking dust baths and they're smooth. Like some of these pictures, you probably saw it, those gorgeous, sleek, a lot of really, really pretty ones are bills. Because they're the ones taking care of themselves while the mom's dealing with the kids. I think there's actually biology terms about it, though, like, was it prostaglandins or something like that, that actually is a hormone related to the, but anyway, I just like the story that she can't take care of her hair when she's got the kids hanging out. But, yeah, in winter, man, there's times they're so fluffy and the way the light shines on them and it glows, their hair is incredible. We actually did an experiment once with infrared imaging. So if you guys are familiar with airplanes that have infrared, it'll show up just like day. And I was like, goats are ready to count. We do infrared imaging with goats. And this company tried it. And we were like, let's try it in winter because in summer there's like sunlight off all these hot rocks that might be harder. They were so well insulated. The company had a hard time seeing them. Amazing. It's really good. And it makes fun to collar them. Sometimes the collars are a little loose in summer. Their summer coats are just very, very short. But the sun is that you get up and like a fur. You can get lots of balls of fur all of the bushes and things. Yes.
Skull. What are the discriminating factors between a mountain goat skull versus the sheep?
Oh, good. So it's a black horse, and the big horns will be more brown.
Skulls.
Gotcha. The bases, the cores, are going to be more bigger than this on the goat. And if it's a ewe sheep, they're going to be more, the goats will be more circular. But even a ewe sheep, the cores are going to be a lot bigger than the mountain goat cores are much smaller. You can see pictures, I can help if you have a video. And it's not surprised because nannies will absolutely defend their kids. The horns are really similar. I've seen nannies with horns bigger than some of the billies sometimes. I've seen 9.5-inch nannies. So sometimes they have those good sharp horns and they can defend themselves if they need. So I'd say the boys better watch out. Well, I don't know how fast they run. I'm not saying it because they like to run. They like a pronghorn. And so I don't know if this is gross. I won't do guys suggested a pizza. When you his lungs are huge, his heart is huge. When you open up sheep or mountain goat, they've got smaller lungs and hearts because they don't have to run long distances, they just need to go up. So I'll learn something from that. Yes.
But it looks like the original native range. A lot of activities.
Yeah, the original range is west of the Continental Divide in Montana. And then same in like Washington, Oregon, coastal BC, Alaska, I think some portions of Alberta. So any place in Colorado they were introduced, any place west of, any place east of the Continental Divide in Montana, they were introduced in like South Dakota, they were introduced in Colorado, they were introduced in Utah. So yeah. Yeah. Yes. All of that. Why should they be heard of that? It was found to take opportunity completely at that point in time. So,
When you're doing ground surveys, how do you know you're not counting the same goats?
oh, great question. I actually have an algorithm, which is a series of steps that I go through to verify my decision making. Sometimes I validate it with an external biologist. What I do is I learn from our callers how far goats can move every couple hours. So if teams are seeing goats, if they're within a couple hundred meters of each other, I'll look at the count composition and the timestamp, and that'll help me figure out, oh, those are likely the same ones, or no, those have got to be different ones. So I have a whole series of things I look for to try to validate that. And I'm almost always err on the side of being conservative because I don't want to issue too many tags. I love giving countries the opportunity to be out among their wildlife and have that once in a lifetime opportunity, but it is my responsibility to make sure I get those lights responsibly, so there'll always be goats for everybody to enjoy. Yes.
If you have to apply for a hunting license, but the 1,500 and like 23 got it.
Yeah.
1,500, they have to pay to apply.
Yeah, you do. And what's nice is you get a big chunk of your money back every year, and you get bonus points, so that for 15 years or more, like I have. And then I've got other odds. They actually square your bonus points. So if somebody's only been paying for winning, their name gets thrown in the hat one time, my name would get thrown in the hat 15 times. So 15 squared times, if anybody's pretty good at math. Yes.
So out of the 20, how many actually harvest?
Good question. I think probably greater than 80%, but what's tricky is what happens to people. I've had people put in their whole lives and now they're 83 years old and maybe they just couldn't make it happen. Or somebody, I had one guy, sheep hunter, he did it with sheep, but God, he tore his hamstring to the bone and he just had a hard time. I mean, life happens. And so you don't know who you did that. This is such a cool story. His own daughter, he put her in for she was 12 years old. And she got a beautiful billy. But he called me, he's like, oh shoot, how do I get this tough back up your district to the Taylor Hill Cars? And I'll be dang if she didn't get it. But what's really cool is 12 years later, she comes into my office as a grown up and got sheep. And it's like, what awesome hunter she was. But my point is, just like who puts it in. I actually had a guy bought sheep tag one time who was like from Tennessee and he'd only ever hunted rabbits. And he did not get his sheep. So I have had, the story is, I don't know if this is a hunter. I have had people that never hunt. Our hunting life survey estimates, well, you guys probably get called by your hunting survey people. I call and say, did you harvest a goat? And did you hunt for a goat first? And every year I get people to say that they never even went hunting. So maybe something happened in their life. they went away, or, you know, moved their job, or whatever it is. So, not because there weren't votes there, but because of money. But on average, most of my districts, 80 to 100% of people want to every single year. And I see that because there's plenty of goats out there for those guys. It's there. Honestly. In winter, like that day, you can put your hand all the way through, like this. Oh, no. I bet voice carries. Yes.
Have you ever seen twins?
I have never, but I've heard it can happen. I think it would be really rare, but it's possible. Probably works by a contrast twin and every single girl does it. Yeah.
It's a quick breeding thing.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. So, yeah, the big males compete for dominance, try to breed as many females as possible. And the run will happen in November, but there'll be some pre-run activity before then. And then the males will kind of go off on their own and either bachelor groups or solo. But they'll really be with the females in that October to November. And the billies will really move in that time period because they're looking for females. And the big ones will have better breeding success for humans. So maybe that brings it back.
Is the meat tasty?
I had some once, and I don't know if it's because I was 22 and horrible in college, or that. I could say, do it. Well, it's really good. Very true. That was my experience too. Sheep, yeah. So I'm going for the brand. Oh, man. I've sheep a couple times. And they very much taste like mutton. I've only had goat the one time.
Does anybody else have any more questions for Julie? Yes. I want to thank all of you that showed up tonight. This is really amazing. And I just want to plug that next week on Wednesday night from 6 to 7, if you guys enjoyed this, the Madison Conservation District and the Madison River Foundation are putting on a watershed speaker series as well right now. Next Wednesday from 6 to 7, we're going to have Lindsay Albertson from MSU come and talk to people in the community about the science behind salmon flies. So, being you guys are big fishermen, we're having another expert just like Julie come and talking to you guys about all the science behind salmon flies. So, where is that? That's going to be at the Dennis Library. The 30 minutes before the event starts, again, we honestly were not expecting this good of a turnout, so we really appreciate your guys' support of Madison Conservation District and everything that we do. We love this valley. All we do is work to protect and preserve the soil and water health here and our way of life. So with that, we appreciate you guys coming. I hope everybody has a great evening.
I know.